Hey friends, it is Jenna, what is up, and welcome back to the Board Game Garden, and welcome to a simplified guide to this game right here. This is A Wayfarer's Tale, The Journey Begins. This is published by Wayfarer Games, who is helping sponsor today's video, so a huge thank you to them. And it is designed by James Emerson, and this is actually a game that I played for the first time years ago when it was a print and play. It was just called A Wayfarer's Tale, and they have now come out with a physical version of this game called A Wayfarer's Tale, The Journey Begins, and this right here is a deluxeified version of it, just to let you know, but there is a retail version, and this is a game that has recently fulfilled on crowdfunding and is getting to a lot of people. So me and Wayfarer Games have teamed up together to bring you guys this simplified guide, and basically what I'm going to be doing in this video is I'm going to be going over generally how to play the game. This is not going to be a full-on how to play A Wayfarer's Tale, The Journey Begins, but it's going to be a video that you guys can come to for kind of like a quick start, you know, simplified guide, like the title says, of this game, so that you guys can come to this video, watch this, and then get right into the game. This game can be played solo, but I won't be going into too much of the solo mode, because the solo mode is actually a solo campaign. There are some additional cards that you add in, 5 additional cards that you add in, and then you also have an additional cube on the score track, and you're going to be going through a campaign, which I have actually played through the solo campaign when I had it as a print and play, and it was very, very fun. But anyways, without further ado, if you guys want to get right into this game, get right into A Wayfarer's Tale, The Journey Begins, then just keep on watching. Give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoy. Also, hit that subscribe button down below if you've yet to do so. We'd love to have you here in the garden. And without further ado, let's get into this simplified guide of A Wayfarer's Tale, The Journey Begins, shall we? Alright, so getting right into generally the aim of the game and the general flow of the game. The general flow of this game is fairly simple. You're just going to be going through 3 different things. Like I said, this game can be played solo. It is a 1 to 4 player game. It plays in about 45 to 60 minutes and is for ages 10 and up. And players are going to be playing as explorers, exploring these different islands in hopes to discover all of the different towns. There are 2 different ways that this game can end. One is when a player has explored to all of the towns on the map, which I will mention that there are a bunch of different maps that you can play with. I have map number 1 here, but there is maps number 1 through 5. But with the map that you're playing with, if a player reaches all of the towns on the map, that's going to end the game immediately. And then also another way to end the game is if a player has 3 missed rolls. And that is that if they cannot use any of the dice that were rolled on a specific turn, they have to X out one of the missed rolls. And if you ever get 3 of those missed rolls, the game is going to end immediately. You are going to be getting victory points during the game, and then you're also going to get some victory points at the end of the game as well, which I'll get into. Now, as for the general game flow of this game is fairly simple, with only 3 things happening during each round, and each of those rounds are being taken simultaneously. And what's going to happen is you're going to do 3 different things. On your turn, you're going to be the active player, and you are going to roll all 4 of these dice. You have 3 white and 1 red. When you are the active player, you do have access to the red die, but all other players do not. You're going to roll those dice, and every player is going to choose a number by adding 2 of the dice together. Obviously, if you're the active player, you can use the red one and add it to a white one as well. But that's the first thing. You're going to roll dice, choose a number. The next thing is you're going to activate a companion. So you have all of your companions here on this board. Once you have activated a companion, that companion is going to allow you to travel to a specific hex on your board. And every player is going to start on one of the towns. That is why we have one little town structure here. This area on the board is to keep track of how many towns you have explored to. So we have all explored to 1 town because we have all started on 1 town. But once you have chosen the companion that you're going to activate with whatever specific number you've chosen with the roll, you are going to then be able to travel to that specific hex. So for example, if I chose the guide allows me to either travel to a jungle or a desert. Once that round is done and you have rolled, activated, and traveled, you would then pass the dice to the next active player, and that would happen over over and over again simultaneously until one of those two endgame triggers has happened. So yeah, that is a general overview of how the game is going to flow, but let's get into the specifics of these three different things that are going to happen. All right, so like I said, the first thing that's going to happen on a round is the active player is going to roll these dice. There are 3 white and 1 red. You're going to roll those. And whatever results are here are going to be the dice that all players are going to be able to take 2 of them and add them together. Like I said already, the active player is the only one that can use the red die. So if I'm the active player, I have access to this red 3. I will say that this roll was very bad. We have 3 3s and a 2. So being the active player is not really that great because there's only a few options that you can kind of add together here. So you could add a 2 and a 3 together to get a 5, or you could add 2 3s together to get a 6. Obviously, the red die is also a 3, so I would only be able to get those 2 results as well. But once you have chosen the number with the roll here, you'll move on to the next step, which is activating. When activating, you're going to be choosing one of your 5 different companions here. That is what this board is here. You have your 5 different companions. You also have the score track around the outside. Then you also have how you're going to keep track of your towns here. So like I said, each player is going to have a starting town. You are going to roll a 6-sided die at the start of the game. And then based off of that roll, you're going to start in one of the 3 starting towns. You're going to add your starting town here because you've discovered 1 starting town. And then moving forward, whenever you do explore to a 2nd town, 3rd town, 4th town, you're going to place another one of these town buildings here onto your board so you can keep track of how many towns you have explored too. But like I was saying, you have the 5 different companions here on your board. You have the coachman, you have the merchant, you have the sailor, you have the guide, and you have the adventurer. And each one of these companions are going to allow you to travel, which is the next step, to a specific hex. So there are, I believe, 5 different types of hexes. There are the gray hexes, which are mountains. There's the green hexes, which are grassland. You also have the yellow hexes, which are desert. There's also the blue inner water spaces, which you are going to have to travel through in order to get to certain spots on the island. And then also with some of the maps, there's going to be sailboat spaces that is going to allow you to travel from one hex to another outside of the island, if that makes sense. So that is with the sailor. And then lastly, there are the forest spaces as well. So with the guide, for example, if you activate her, she is going to allow you to either travel to an adjacent desert hex or an adjacent forest hex. And each of these companions are going to need specific numbers or specific sets of numbers in order to activate them. So let's quickly get into all of the different companions and how you're going to be able to activate them. All right, so starting out with the coachman. The coachman is going to allow you to travel to an adjacent mountain or grassland, and you're going to have to start with a number. So I could choose, let's say, this 5. I would take this 12-sided die, I would set it to a 5, place it on here, and now moving forward, whenever I activate the coachman, I will have to do a equal or greater to number than that. So when I activate the coachman again, it either has to be a 5 or something greater than 5. I would move it forward along the path. And the interesting thing about the coachman is that once you get to a certain spot, you're not going to be able to continue on the coachman's path unless you have discovered a tavern. So there's going to be tavern spaces on the map. Once you have discovered a tavern, you're going to be able to take one of your cubes, place it there to denote that you have gone to that tavern, and the coachman can continue on his route. So there are going to be 2 different taverns that you have to discover in order to continue moving, but that is the coachman. The next one that I'm going to explain is down in the right-hand corner, and this is the adventurer. And the adventurer is going to allow you to move to a mountain or a forest, so a gray or a blue hex. And this is kind of similar to the coachman, but you are moving up and down a mountain. Very similar to the coachman. The first one you're going to activate by using a number. So again, I could use a 5. I would set this 12-sided die to a 5, start my kind of adventure on these mountains with the adventurer, and moving forward, whenever I activated the adventure, I would have to do a greater number. So unlike the coachman where you can do a equal or greater, with the adventurer, I have to do either greater or less than, because as you go up the mountain, you have to do greater than, and as you go down the mountain, you have to do less than. So with this, starting with a 5, I would then have to go up from 5, and then that would be the top of the mountain, and then I would go down from there to the bottom. And then moving from one mountain to another, there are 3 different mountains here. You can start with a new number, so you can kind of reset moving from one mountain to another. So I could end this first mountain with, let's say, a 7, but moving into the next mountain, I could then take that 7 and reset it to a 3. And ultimately with these mountains, you are trying to start a mountain with a lowest number possible, and then that way you have a lot of numbers to go up from and then a lot of numbers to go down from, if that makes sense. So that is how the adventurer works. Moving into the third companion, this is the sailor. She's going to allow you to, like I said, go into some of the water spaces, so either the inner water spaces or with the sailboats on the outskirts of the islands. And with the sailor, you have to use doubles. So with this situation here, I could use 2 3s. They can be any numbers, but you just have to have doubles. So I could use 2 3s, and then I would be able to start with the sailor here. And then moving forward, whenever I used a double, I would move down the sailor's track and be able to activate the sailor and move into a water space. Next up, we have the guide, which the guide is going to allow you to go to either the forest or the desert. And this is, you're going to start with this first spot here, and you're going to zigzag down or snake down this area. And she is going to basically need a specific number that has a requirement for each of the different steps on this track. So the first one is you just have to have a number that is greater than 5. The next one would be greater than 7, then greater than 9, so on and so forth, moving down her track here to activate her spaces and move to one of those 2 types of hexes. And then lastly, we have the merchant, which I will say that this one is the most complicated, but it is not actually that complicated. It is just that whatever number you have decided here, that is going to allow you to place a cube either in a column or a row. So the columns here are a 3, 4, 5, 6, and then the rows are an 8, 9, 10, and 11. And you will notice that some of these spaces have monsters in them, and all of the different rows and columns have a chest by them. This basically means that if I was to decide to activate, I could activate with a 5, and I could place a cube into any of the 4 spaces in the 5 column. And if I decided to place in the monster column, that is going to trigger a monster roll. And later in the game, if you have completed an entire row with cubes, you'll be able to do a treasure roll, which you might be wondering, what are these treasures and monsters? Which, let's get into that now that we are finished with the companions. All right, so as we were talking about all of these different companions and triggering these different companions, you might have noticed first the gem icons throughout the different paths, as well as the monster icons. And whenever you land on one of these specific icons, you're going to either gain victory points based off of the number that you use that round, or you're going to lose victory points. So for example, here with the coachman, the 3rd space here has a gem in it. If the 3rd space that I moved to, I used, let's say, a 7 that round, that would mean that I would gain 7 victory points for using a 7 on that space. If you ever see a gem times 2, that means that you would double that gem space. So if again I used a 7, I would double, I would gain 14 victory points for that. But on the opposite side of that, unfortunately, we have the monster spaces. So these will be opposite of that. So whatever die number you've used for that specific spot, you will then lose victory points. So strategically, I would probably try to get as low of a number as possible, but let's say I ended up with an 11 at this spot here, I would unfortunately have to lose 11 victory points for that. So if you ever see a gem spot, you're going to gain victory points based off of that die number. If you see a monster spot, you are unfortunately going to lose victory points based off of the die number of that spot. And very much like that, with the merchant, like I was explaining before, whenever you cover up one of the monster spots on this diagonal here, you are going to have to roll the monster/treasure die. And whatever you roll on that die, that is going to be how many victory points you lose. And also, like I said, with the treasure icons, once I have completed a row or a column, I will then again be able to roll this monster/treasure die, and that is going to be how many victory points I will gain for that treasure roll. And there are going to be some things that you're going to be able to gain on some of these different hexes that are going to allow you to mitigate these things. So let's get quickly into some of the common hex spots or common hex locations on the maps. All right, so the first hex location or common hex location that you're going to see are the towns. These are pretty self-explanatory. These are going to be where you want to get in order to reach all of the towns, because ultimately that is one of your goals to end the game, is to reach all of these towns. Also, additionally, at the end of the game for final scoring, you are going to get 5 victory points for each town that you have discovered or gotten to. So it's very important to get to these different towns. Also, when we get into travel, they are also very important, which we'll get into. But another thing you're going to find are the taverns. You are going to need to get to these in order to continue on the coachman's path. And then when you play with a expansion, which is the tavern deck, this is going to allow you to get additional things, which we'll get into as well. Additionally, you're going to have the different shield spaces and chest spaces. So if you ever see a shield with an arrow around it, if you ever land on one of those spaces, you're going to be able to gain a shield token, and you're going to add that to your merchant area. And this is going to allow you to re-roll your treasure or monster die. So you're going to be able to use these tokens in order to do a re-roll to either get a higher number for your treasure dice or a lower number, hopefully, for your monster die. So you're going to be able to use those. And then additionally, you're going to be able to see these ×2 treasure spaces. Whenever you land on those, you're going to get a ×2 treasure chest token, and you can use this at any time to double the amount of your treasure roll in order to gain treasure. So if I did, luckily on a turn, roll a 6 for one of my treasure rolls, I could use one of these to double that to get 12 victory points instead of 6. And then the last common space that you're going to see on some of the maps are going to be the sailboats, like I said. And this is going to be how you're going to be able to move outside of the island in order to get from one outer space to another outer space. And you are going to have to trigger the sailor to get to the sailboat, but then you are going to have to trigger another companion in order to get off of the sailboat onto the other hex that you want to get to. So those are all of the common hex locations. All right, so now that we have discussed all of the companions as well as the different common locations on the map here, let's get into the travel. So after you have activated one of these companions, that companion is then going to allow you to travel to one of the 2 hexes that they are connected to. And with travel, there are a few different rules that you have to keep in mind when it comes to traveling to the next adjacent hex. So when you do travel, you always have to keep in mind that you always have to do one of 2 things. You either have to continue at the end of one of your paths, or you can branch off from a town. So this is a very important thing that you have to keep in mind. You can never branch off from a path. So in the middle of a path, you can't just, go off in another direction. You must continue at the end of that path, or, like I said, you can branch off from one of your discovered towns. Some questions you might have are, can I depart in any direction from a town? Yes, you can. Once you've discovered a town, simply just start another path in any direction you would like. Another question may be, can I split my route other than at a town? No, you cannot. And lastly, can I return and extend a route I've previously branched from a town earlier in the game? Yes. So you can branch out from any town, and you can have multiple paths going at one time. But you do always have to keep in mind that you always have to continue at the end of any of the paths you've already started, or you can start a new path from any of the towns that you've already discovered. All right, so that is pretty much everything for the base game of A Wayfarer's Tale, The Journey Begins. I do quickly want to get into kind of the end game. So like I said, once one player has discovered all of the towns on that specific map, that would immediately end the game, or if one player has 3 missed rolls. So if you're unable to make a combination that you can use with one of your companions, you're going to have to put a missed roll, and then if you miss 3 of them, that will end the game immediately as well. And once the game has ended, you will go into some final scoring. So let's quickly get into that. All right, so for final scoring, there are 3 different things that you're going to tally up. The first thing is very easy, and that is just simply where you have ended on the score track here. So all of the victory points that you have gotten throughout the game for both your gems, your treasures, and then obviously obviously you would have lost points for some of the monster spaces, but whatever your track has ended on, that would be added in the bottom right-hand corner of the map. You're also going to get, like I said, 5 victory points for each of the towns that you have gotten to, and then you're going to get 3 additional points for every town that you have in the longest continuous path of towns. Once you have counted up all of those victory points, whatever player had the most victory points would be the winner of A Wayfarer's Tale: The Journey Begins. If there is a tie, it's going to be the player that has gotten to more towns. And if there is still a tie, the players would share the victory. So that is everything for A Wayfarer's Tale: The Journey Begins. But I am going to quickly get into some of the expansions that you can play with as well. All right, so first up we have the Tavern deck. So you can add this into the game, and this deck is going to be made up of a few different types of cards. There are going to be additional companions that you can add into the game that actually get you to take an additional tile, and that will be a different companion that you're going to be able to activate for the remainder of the game. There are also going to be benefactor cards, which these are going to be cards that are going to allow you to do kind of one-time things, or they're also going to be things that'll get you additional victory points at the end of the game. So if it is one of those, you would add it beside your board, and then you would have that for the end of the game. And then lastly, there are also additional quests. So these are going to point out a specific hex on the board, which some of the hexes on each of the maps are going to have little shapes on them, and those are going to be connected to these quests. So this one here is the Oasis Shrine, and you would now have this quest that you are going to go on in order to get to that spot. If you are able to travel to that specific hex, you'd be able to gain victory points based off of that quest card. So those are the 3 different types of cards that you're going to find in the Tavern deck. And basically what you're going to do is you're going to shuffle up these cards, have them in reach of all players, and whenever you reach one of the Tavern hexes on your map, which you're going to have to do this anyways if you want to continue on the path for the coachman, because you do have to unlock those different taverns. But additionally, when you get to these taverns, you're going to be able to draw 2 of the Tavern cards, and then you're going to decide between the 2 that you have drawn which one you want to keep and which one you want to discard. Moving on to the next module, that is the Fortune Teller module. So each player is going to get one of these Fortune Teller cards, and you're going to place that beside your board, and basically this is just going to allow you to mitigate the dice. So it says here, the fortune teller manipulates future choices and decisions. Add or subtract 1 from your roll up to 3 times. So you're going to be able to mitigate the dice rolled here, and whenever you do that, you're going to take one of your cubes and place a cube on there to denote that you've used it once, and then once you've used it 3 times, you're not going to be able to use it again, but this will help with mitigating some dice and allow you to strategically change the dice a few times throughout the game in order to get the results that you really want. So that is the Fortune Teller. Next up, we have the Storm cards, which these are interesting and adds in a little bit of player interaction if that is something that you enjoy in a game. But basically, these 4 Storm cards, you are going to actually shuffle these into the Tavern deck. And if a player ever draws one of these along with another card and they decide to choose the Storm card, that player does not get affected by this, but every other player at the table then has to pass their map clockwise around the table. Again, the player that chose the card does not have to do this, but players are then, with the map that they were given, outline up to 3 of a specific type of hex based off of the Storm card. So this Storm card here is for mountains. So they would outline up to 3 adjacent hexes. They do have to be adjacent from other explored spaces that the player has on their map. They would outline 3 of those spaces, and then moving forward, the player that has that map, if they ever move into one of those spaces, those outlined spaces are now kind of storm spaces or storm hexes. So if the player does want to move into one of these storm hexes, unfortunately, they are going to have to lose 3 victory points. So this is interesting because other players are going to be able to affect your map, and they are going to block off some spaces that you can still move into, but unfortunately it's going to be, you know, treacherous weather, and you're going to have to lose a few victory points for those. So that is the Storm cards. And then the last small module that you can play with is if you want a shorter game, which I think this is really nice to have, But basically this is going to be for this map here, which this is map number 4, and this has 2 different islands. And basically this is going to allow you to play a shorter game by playing on one of the 2 smaller islands. So the game would play the same, but obviously the game would end sooner because based off of whatever island you are on, it is going to have less towns, and the game would still end once a player has discovered all the towns on a specific island that you were playing with. So that is a way to have a shorter game. All right, friends, so that is going to be everything for today's simplified guide of A Wayfarer's Tale: The Journey Begins. If you have received your copy, or if this is something that you are wanting to pick up soon, hopefully you enjoy your plays. I do remember really enjoying this one. I have not played this physical copy yet, but I can tell you guys right now, this is something that I'm going to be playing very, very soon because I really enjoyed my time with the print and play, and I am so happy that they did come out with a physical version of this game because I think it is very good. But yes, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. If you did, please give this video a big thumbs up. Also, hit that subscribe button down below if you've yet to do so. We'd love to have you here in the garden. A huge thank you again to Wayfarer Games for sponsoring today's video. I appreciate it so much. Remember, you are somebody's reason to smile, and I will see you in the next board game video. Bye, friends!